In the early months of 1604, a radical clergyman, often in trouble with the authorities for using unapproved texts in his sermons, hit upon a very strange idea. Instead of publishing his usual books on the catechism, what if he published a book about the very words that we use? A book that tried or attempted to encapsulate our language.
Flash by name, flash by nature. Hooray!
It would attempt for the first time to gather a glossary of the English language and the new expressions and phrases that he heard spoken on the streets of Coventry. Nothing like it had been attempted before, and in the June of that year, his Table Alphabetical, a book by the clergyman Robert Corddry, hit the bookshops, and it sold like wildfire. Robert Corddry had started a new publishing phenomenon. By 1617, another 3 editions of his book had come to print, containing just over 2,500 words. Robert Corddry's Table Alphabetical became the first English dictionary, and it was a massive commercial success. But what's interesting is what came next, because not only had Corddry hit upon a fascinating idea, but because of his book, others attempted to enlarge upon his work, adding more and more words of the English language. And so, in the middle of the 1600s, a new race began. A race to create a book of everything. What would a book of everything look like? At least for English speakers, it would be long, very long, volumes long. Unlike Wikipedia, it would never end because there are always new things to add. It would need to contain history and geography and the meaning of every single word ever used. It would need to contain an entire language, so that if you were to go back to the time of Chaucer or Shakespeare or Dickens, you could use the book to understand the exact meaning of every word they use in the context of their own history and time. It would take dogged determination to extract from each word its precise meaning in the context of its history as well as its usage. Not just what each word means today, but what each word has ever meant. This is the incredible story of the Book of Everything. Now, this book would be almost impossible because every single word in our language has multiple meanings that can change with time. Every word that I have already used in this video has multiple meanings, and it would take hours just to list them. For example, the word set, as in setting up, has 64 definitions. The word make has 197 definitions. And how do we pin down these definitions? How do we make concrete the meaning of any word? You can either trust in the expertise of some academic or government official, someone who is deemed to have authority over the language.
You have authority over all of them.
I have authority?
That's right. And people must respect it.
Well, that should be fine, just fine.
Fine, just fine.
Fine. Oh no, nothing's worse than Carmen with authority.
Or we can look back in time and see how the word has been used through each generation. We can then point to how the word has been used wherever, whenever, and however it's ever been used. So for our book of everything to be complete, we would need to go back through history, through every printed word, and from this pinpoint the exact moment that each word gathered a new meaning. The word dog must have at some point simply meant the mammal canis, but then at some point someone had the idea to add another meaning.
Master hands are always ready. 1 for all and 1 for 1. Helping everybody. 1 for all and 0 for 1.
They may have observed the propensity of dogs to follow their masters, or track and follow rabbits, and used the word dog to mean to follow something relentlessly, as in dogged determination. But when did this occur? And how did the word gather this new meaning? or the meaning to do something doggedly, or that a book can have pages that are dog-eared, or that the world is dog-eat-dog, or that to make this video I had to work like a dog, or that a dog is also a person we can't trust, a dirty dog.
I said, you dirty dog.
Our book of everything would need to gather all of these meanings and more. And I said that this project would be almost impossible. I said almost because it's actually been done.
So you're telling me there's a chance?
And this video is about that book. And if you're tempted to call our book of everything a dictionary, well, that's only half of the story, because a typical dictionary just tells us the meaning of words. Conventionally, a linguist, or more accurately, a philologist,
Philology.
would prescribe the meaning of words in alphabetical order, and this approach would result in a dictionary that is prescriptive. Its authority to determine the meaning of words and of the language comes from an academic study of language. This is the basis for almost all dictionaries, including in English Cordry's 1604 Table Alphabetical, the very first English dictionary, as well as Samuel Johnson's later work, which became known as the Dictionary for generations.
Here it is, sir, the very cornerstone of English scholarship. This book, sir, contains every word in our beloved language.
Every single one, sir?
Every single word, sir.
Oh, well, in that case, sir, I hope you will not object if I also offer the doctor my most enthusiastic contrafibularities. I'm anaspeptic, phrasmotic, even compunctious to have caused you such pericombobulation.
This perspective, one of an authoritative figure over the language, leads some countries, including France and Spain, to have a royal society which determines how the language should be taught and used, coming up yearly often with bulletins to update teachers and students. And the dictionary that comes from this perspective is like a Bible for the language. It tells you the rules and the meaning of words.
I can't make any sense of this book you've written, Ishmael. It's just a list of words.
That's because it's a dictionary.
What's a dictionary?
Look it up.
But what if you got a historian to write a dictionary, to document an entire language? They would be tasked with surveying an entire language and taking each word and tracking it through history to determine how it's been used through each period of time and how and when it gathered new meanings. And so rather than prescribing the meaning of words, they would be describing, simply describing how the language has been used over time. And so this work would be a descriptive dictionary, and its only authority
I have authority.
comes from the millions of people who have used this word over time, and the potentially hundreds of thousands of times it's ever been printed and used. This type of dictionary would need constant updating, because words always gather new meanings, and its only authority would come from observation, from listening to how words are being used by real people.
Not staying for your pendigestatory interludicule.
And so rather than having experts in language, you would need experts in the history of motorcycling, experts in Indian cuisine, people who know everything about household appliances, or the popular music of South Africa, or the history of stationery and paperclips. You would need someone who is an expert in the obscure language of farming technology.
I said, I don't know too much about the machine. It's the size going on now. I mean, stop going to back your machine up. Oh, yeah, you was all wrong. I'm going to get you tracking in instead of the road. Yeah, delation, some of that.
You're not happy then?
The Book of Everything would need to gather all these experts and more. And in this system, with this kind of dictionary, there would be no need for a royal society of academics and teachers to have an authority over the language and tell us its meaning. In this system, Instead of those authority figures, we would simply have the voice of the millions of people who use the language. And so the Book of Everything, as I've been calling it, would need to contain the combined wisdom of thousands of experts in different fields, and their wisdom would need to reflect actual linguistic usage, a mirror reflecting the creativity of poets and scientists and journalists and writers and rap artists alike. And because this is a project of the English language, it's an enormous undertaking, because English has over 500,000 words. So to put this into context, the first dictionary ever written of the English language, it contained 2,543 English words and their meanings. It's a book I've used many times because I did my doctorate in the literature of that period, and so his dictionary was very useful to get an understanding of how these words were being used in the context of their time. It's fascinating that before 1604, no one had ever had the idea of writing an English language dictionary. There were foreign language dictionaries translating from English to Italian, for example, but no one had ever written down in English a list of words and their definitions, which means that Shakespeare wrote probably about half of his volume of work without having access to a dictionary. But it sold like hotcakes, and its commercial success led to a succession of other small dictionaries of 5,000 to 10,000 words. And later Samuel Johnson and a small team of linguists attempted to create a dictionary that contained all English words. And he managed to come up with a dictionary that had 42,773 words. It's an incredible undertaking. And for about a century, Johnson's dictionary was the dictionary. If people had any books on their shelves at all, they'd likely have the Bible, the works of Shakespeare, and Johnson's dictionary. But Johnson's dictionary had limitations, chief of which is Johnson's own limitations in education and understanding. He was, for his time, an educated man, but when he tries to describe an elephant, a creature that he probably had never seen, he describes its mating ritual in a way that would be physically impossible for an elephant. So his work of over 40,000 words is an astonishing accomplishment, but it's only less than 10% of the entire English language. By 1857, a new area of study had emerged. Philologists met to survey and quantify the extent of the English language. In their monthly meetings, they reported on any unregistered words that they had encountered that were yet to be officially defined. The list of unregistered words had grown so long that by November of 1857, the Philological Society decided to enlist as many volunteers as they could to read everything that had ever been written. And this wasn't just confined to England, Wales, Scotland, and Ireland. This extended to all areas of the world where English was spoken, so Canada and Australia and South Africa and India. These volunteers were to read everything they could get their hands on and report back any unregistered words that were yet to receive a definition. Our Book of Everything was to have 10 times the number of entries listed in any other dictionary yet written, and was to gather almost 2 million illustrative quotations of these words being used. They would refer not only to printed books, but also to newspapers, articles, academic journals, cookery books, and written songs. To complete every definition, every nuanced meaning of every word would require reading all of these and more. It would require reading everything ever published. Only by doing this could you fully define a history of each expression. The first editor of this incredibly complex work was Herbert Coleridge. Coleridge was the grandson of Samuel Taylor Coleridge, the poet, and he had all the volunteers send in their slips of paper with the words they had encountered and the context of where that word was found. And he would compile these slips in pigeonholes. He had a bookcase converted into a pigeonhole library for these slips, and it had 54 distinct pigeonholes for the compilation of this incredible work. Coleridge's pigeonholes are still there at the offices of the Oxford University Press. What came apparent very quickly is that 54 pigeonholes would not be enough. After 10 years of failure, a new editor was proposed, a self-taught didact called James Murray from Scotland. Murray himself received criticism because he had no university degree, but the extent of his linguistic knowledge was so impressive that the board of University Press approved him. Murray said that he would be able to complete this project within 7 to 10 years. Well, it actually took 70 years. He extended the volunteer system to incorporate a much wider group of people, and he had them send in their slips. His pigeonhole system was called the scriptorium, and again, the ambition here is not to tell us the meaning of each word, but to tell us what every word has ever meant through history. In the film made about this process, there's a scene where they have a discussion about the word approve. Now, they found an early instance of the use of the word approve by Wycliffe in the 1300s. And then the next reference they can find using the word approve wasn't until the 1800s with Ruskin. Any attempt to skip the centuries where the word approve could not be found was met by Ruskin saying, "We will not skip the centuries. We are recording the evolution of meaning." The missing centuries would need to be found, and this would require reading as much printed material as possible from the 1300s to the 1800s, looking for one word, approve. Once found, any reference to the word approve would be noted on a slip of paper, documenting where it was found, noting exactly how this word was used. And this level of detail would be needed for not only the word approve, but every other word in the English language. And so the work requires reading every printed book, every newspaper, every journal, every comic book, every medical book, published diaries, commercial reports, and every medieval manuscript, every printed and written word in English, noting all of the subtle nuances in meaning and context, noting how each word passes from generation to generation, gathering new meanings and shedding old ones. Only the Victorians, with their propensity to catalogue everything, were mad enough to even attempt this.
For a time I went to school, but then I found a job as a clerk to a lawyer. Oh, it made my poor head throb. I failed to be an actor despite my loud gob. Ended up reporting speeches of the parliamentary mob. Then, as everybody knows, I started writing prose.
Murray was 41 years old when he began this work, and despite dying at the age of 78, he never lived to see the entire work published. He did see the volumes covering up to the letter P, and he died at the exact point where the definition for the word turn down was being constructed. The work was published with the name A New English Dictionary on Historical Principles, founded mainly on the materials collected by the Philological Society. The rest of the first edition was published after Murray's death, finally ending with the letter Z in volumes up to 1928, and by that point, authors such as J.R.R. Tolkien had been involved in submitting contributions and editing the final work. And then in 1933, the title was officially changed to the Oxford English Dictionary. And by that stage, the work was 12 volumes long, with a final supplement adding corrections. The second edition of the complete printed work of the Oxford English Dictionary was released in 1989, and this work is really never-ending. Currently, at this point, a third edition of the work is being worked on and is due for publication in 2037. It's not clear at this point whether the third edition will appear in print. The Oxford University Press decided to make future editions of the work available on CD-ROM and now, of course, on the internet. And there are constant updates to this work. Every year, new words are added to the Oxford English Dictionary. Academics, hobbyists, and history enthusiasts continue to scour the complete printed material of English language, looking for words that have an earlier reference to those that are found in the Oxford English Dictionary. If you can find, for example, a use of the word football earlier than the 14th century first appearance of the word, then you write into Oxford University Press with the information you have found. Antedated words are the golden ticket to enthusiasts of the Oxford English Dictionary. If you'd like to use the dictionary, look at it for yourself to see what a masterpiece it is. You can go online to the Oxford English Dictionary. I'll put a link in the description. I think it costs £10 for a month. It has annual and lifetime subscriptions as well, I believe. £10, and you can use it for a month to look up as many words as you like. You'll see historical references and quotations from work through the ages that give definition and meaning to each word. Now, one of the heroes of the army of volunteers that helped to compile this astonishing work is a man by the name of William Chester Minor. And Minor deserves his own section in this video. He's a man who Murray said we could easily illustrate the last 4 centuries from his quotations alone. Murray was an army surgeon in the American Civil War, an experience that hugely traumatized him. Deciding to come away from the United States and live in England, he found himself suffering from paranoia and delusions. In 1857, William Minor shot and killed an innocent man who he believed was breaking into his apartment. It turns out the man was simply on his way to work to support his family of 6 children and a pregnant wife. In court, hearing his full traumatic story, the jury decided to find William Minor not guilty of murder by reason of insanity, and instead he was incarcerated at the Broadmoor Asylum for the criminally insane. There he managed to collect a library of important books of English literature through the centuries, using his army pension to help fuel this obsession with books. Many of them were in fact supplied to him by the widow of the man that he murdered. It's highly likely that Minor supported the family with his army pension. Minor's contribution to the Oxford English Dictionary was so vast that Murray visited him many times, and Murray eventually campaigned for Minor to be returned to the United States, a decision that was made by the then Home Secretary of the government, a young Winston Churchill. Minor lived until 1920, but it's a full 8 years before the complete first edition of the Oxford English Dictionary came to print. The OED is a dictionary like no other.
I consider the OED to be the greatest humanistic research project in the world. It sheds light on language, history, culture, science, as nothing else does. And I like the fact that the OED is Janus-faced. It's forward-looking. It uses technology quite a bit. I believe the XML markup language was developed because of the computerization of the OED. But it's also backward-looking, and I mean that in a good sense, that they're among the few people nowadays that are preserving certain scholarly virtues, such as verifying information in the original sources, which the OED does religiously.
It's a history of an entire language. Each word is given a thorough historical reference for how it's been used through the ages. The power and authority of the work derives from the usage of the language itself, and not from an academic board. It contains scientific and mathematical terminology, and both words that are in common use and entirely obscure, and gives contextual references for every single word. And for this reason, it is my book of everything, the result of a mass reading of every word ever printed. I've put links in the description to 2 books that cover this amazing story. And if you'd like to read more and find this fascinating, I suggest The Professor and the Madman, and also the book called The Meaning of Everything, both of them written by Simon Winchester. By purchasing the books using the link I've put in the description, you'll be supporting my channel, so thank you. There's also an Amazon movie made about this incredible story, starring Mel Gibson as Murray and Sean Penn as Minor. If you like this story, I think you'll love the movie. If you've enjoyed this video, I think you'll love my other video called The Ancient Book That Invented the Modern World. It's the incredible story of how a single copy of an ancient Roman text, lost for 1,000 years, a book that talks of atoms and an infinite universe, was rediscovered in the 1400s and kickstarted the Renaissance. I'll put a link here, and I hope you enjoy it. Thanks for watching.